Hi.
Welcome, Dean Alonistiotis.
Thank you.
Else
Be
with
here.
another complex name like myself. So we
Yeah,
have.
of course.
I am Tomas de Medici, founder of the Chicago Sustainability Series. Super excited to be joined by Dean, who is a chief of staff at the Metropolitan Water Reclamation District of Chicago, and before that was the director of economic development at City of Chicago.
Sure. So clarity, I'm chief of staff for one of the commissioners, Commissioner Kim Buclet, at MWRD, which has been, I've been there since December of 2018, and absolutely has been an incredible, insightful opportunity for me to work under Commissioner Buclet, but also to see what is happening in regards to wastewater and stormwater management here in Cook County. So super excited to talk about that, and thank you for the opportunity to be here, Tomas.
Well, it's, even in our pre-discussions, we're able to cover so much. So we'll try to keep it tight because this could very easily be a multi-hour.
Yeah, I can definitely talk for hours, that's for sure.
And actually, our first podcast was the Water Dialogue back in May 2016 when MWRD spoke on our first panel. So jumping right in, Dean, if you could start us off with your personal story and what brought you to working in water and MWRD.
Sure, no, thank you. So my personal story is son of immigrant Greek American heritage. Parents migrated here in the 1970s. Have stayed for my entire life, actually, here in Chicago. Went to undergrad at DePaul, studied political science, went to grad school at Northwestern, doing MPPA, and really have been interested in water in the last, I'd say, 5 years, because there's been not only a national discussion around it, but an international discussion. We hear often the connection between water is the new oil, similar to data. And, I think it's tangible, a concrete natural resource that we see here, with the Great Lakes being our backyard, 20% of the world's fresh water. So after a stint at City Hall, I wanted to do something else and figured, what can I do? And this opportunity presented itself. And I thought, wow, how can I think about water within the realm of economic development, within the realm of public health, as we'll talk about later. But honestly, it's activating a key resource that we have many, I would say, take for granted here in Illinois and in our region, and actually activating it for good, and the opportunity to create both an economic driver, but also a social driver as well.
Water touches everything. It's such a comprehensive.
Yeah, and honestly, water has no boundaries and no borders. So if you think about it as an entire ecosystem, and that's how the commissioners are laid out. There's 9 commissioners that sit on the board, and there's been discussions in the past of, is it a district at large capacity where they represent, and honestly, all of them have come back and said the same thing: is that water has no boundaries. So it's not territorial that, this is my specific area or district, and any issue that goes across that, well, that's somebody else's issue. And that's actually the most insightful way to think about water, and honestly, the environment as a whole. So
well, with that intersectional framework, can you tell us a little bit more about the things you're working on right now, and then how they intersect with the larger mission of MWRD today?
Yeah, so I think a lot of our work has started previously to my tenure there, but a lot of the projects have been investing in stormwater management programs and partnerships across Cook County. MWRD, I often say, is probably the most important government agency nobody's ever heard about or thought about thereafter, until the simple fact you can't flush your toilet anymore. Or your basement is backed up or some sort. And then all of a sudden it comes home pretty quickly. So as we see with climate change and recent weather patterns, MWRD is going to play a crucial role in the future of not only our city, but also our county and our region. And a lot of the work that I undertake now is more policy driven and big picture, if you may. MWRD has a superb staff, led by an executive director, Brian Perkovich, and under President Carrie Steele's leadership. The staff at MWRD, I would say, is probably by far the best staff I've ever met. in my life. They're top notch in all the skill sets that they have, both in engineering and other technical backgrounds. But the staff is superb, and the staff at MWRD really does the day-to-day operational stuff, and they're great. And then the experts in their field, world-renowned for that matter. And the Board of Commissioners are tasked with doing a strategic business plan, a forward-thinking ideology, if you may, and policy-driven initiatives. And that's where I really help Commissioner Buclet in her work is, where can the district be in the next 5 years? What are the hottest trends that we think can make an impact both locally as well as regionally as well as nationally? One of the important issues that I've been tasked with under her direction is environmental justice. What does the word environmental justice mean in 2020 in a world that we're going through so much right now? Well, how does that impact everybody's life from environmental perspective? We know communities are impacted much more differently on the south and west side of the city of Chicago. On the south suburbs, for example, are impacted significantly more in flooding. Their access to whether it's fresh fruit or vegetables or even access to clean water is a challenge. And, we know that not only topology that Chicago, the south and west side of the Chicago floods more often. A recent article in the Sun-Times talks about it pretty evidently. And those are the things that I'm thinking about is how can I work on stuff like that? How can we make an impact at MWRD? How can the work that we do impact so many millions of people every day across Cook County, which is the second largest county in the country? But what are we able to do to make a difference in the lives of so many where oftentimes environmental issues are not top of mind? They're not the thing that people wake up and say, hey, I want to make a difference in the environment. That is not on their 5 things to worry about every day, but it has to be a part of what we work on and focus on every day at MWRD. So I'm really tasked with kind of being proactive and thinking about how are we investing in green infrastructure equitably across the region? How are we thinking about both public-private investments in stormwater management? Where are we moving the needle along the way in regards to opportunity to make stormwater management a real core function when we think about urban planning, when we're thinking about where the region as a whole is going? So working with CMAP, working with MPC, working with other regional stakeholders to get activated on stuff like that. So that's kind of my core function of work every day.
I appreciate the humanist underpinning that you're approaching this with. One of my experiences in solar development was the first time I met with an elected official in an environmental justice community, low-income census tract to, at the early stages of trying to see if we could do an Illinois Solar for All project. This was like a year and a half before the project ever got approved. And the first conversation I had with this elected official who represented her ward, she, made the point of as developers, as outside agents, you have to understand, and I joined her on this topic, I'm so glad you're making this point, that you have to understand and bear the responsibility of the larger experiences that these folks in these communities have had, because they've had positive experiences and they've had negative experiences, they've had everything in between. And if you're an outside actor providing a service and you're not okay with all right, people may have some skepticism and that's okay, or people may have some hopes, etc. It really sounds with what you're doing, you have that sense of humanism and responsibility informing your approach.
Yeah, honestly, Tomas, it's really thinking about kind of, I ultimately think government is there to serve a purpose and to serve as a social safety net, if you may, for individuals. And I completely understand in sometimes apprehension and inability to understand where people are coming from, whether it's, oh, here's government coming in and telling me what's best for me and my family, while, many of the challenges that we think of is simply listening and talking to people and understanding where it actually hits home for them. Flooding shouldn't be an issue. It's not a D or an R issue. It should be a humanistic issue that nobody should be willing to accept the fact that their home or their community gets flooded every time it rains. That's just, I think at the bare, we should all agree on that flooding and similar to investing in infrastructure, It shouldn't be driven by political partisanship. It should be really driven about the opportunity to make difference and make impact along the way.
Absolutely. And, you know, you started to touch upon you and the commissioner and the organization as a whole are very conscious of the context of 2020 and just kind of our contemporary challenges, whether that's climate change, extreme weather, and global health with the pandemic.
Sure.
How do you approach this? How do you and your work, and how does MWRD and the commissioner weigh and break down something like climate change into actionable steps or actionable plans in their approaches?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think one of the first questions that the commissioner asked was in January of 2019, which was the simple request is, does MWRD have a climate action plan? Does MWRD have a resiliency plan? And frankly, it was a starting point in conversation for us, not only within our office, but I think as an organization as a whole, to see what does that mean for one of the largest wastewater agencies in the country, the second largest landowner in Cook County behind the forest preserve, and actually having honest and transparent conversation as, it takes a lot of energy to move in clean water. That's the reality of the thing. Is where are we going to be able to target goals and reasonable goals? And the backset of, a lot of the national politics that is happening right now is the demise of the EPA for a whole wide range of reasons. And when the federal government is not in play and responsible for a lot of it, what it all comes down to is the local stuff. And what role and responsibility will MWRD have in kind of a local leader in the stormwater and wastewater sector across? And honestly, that was the reality that we continue to. We just recently got our first draft of our climate action plan, and we're going to be presenting it to the larger audience in a study session, which is our form of committee hearings at MWRD. But it's really having an open conversation with internal stakeholders, external partners, and having a conversation of what is the right targets for the size of MWRD, and where's the opportunity to make impact for us as an agency. Is it, how do we reduce our carbon footprint? Is that a tangible marker that we can make and say, hey, set by X date, we want to be able to reduce X, Y, and Z from our carbon footprint? Are we able to do more in renewable energy? Are we able to do more in X, Y, and Z opportunity? And having that conversation, I think, is going to be more open and honest where we are now and where we can be at a future time frame.
And I'm so curious to see the report when it's available for public consumption.
Sure.
I'm curious if you're able to speak. Were there any findings in putting together that report that surprised you or surprised the commissioner, and that you all were able to?
I will be honest, I haven't gone depth into it just yet, but I think just the task of having the exercise of doing this report, it will be telling. I think our ability. One of I think in 2017, the district as a whole participated in the U.S. Climate Alliance and the Paris Agreement, they signed on as a supporter of it. And as we know, the current administration took a reverse course on that. Well, those are our opportunities for us to look as a whole, as an agency, and say, hey, look, there's still targets out there that we can meet or have been set by others, and where's our role in meeting them? So I haven't just dug deep enough to let you know, but doing the exercise alone is important. Cook County, for example, just released their own climate energy plan about a week or so ago. These are conversations that are, many years, 5 or 6 years ago, were not a normal conversation for governments to have. They were either driven by individual sectors, either the energy sector and mostly pro-good energy holders, and the private industry wasn't pushing the needle along the way to make change and impact. But now it's the reverse. It's government leading the way. It's saying, ESG investing is a good thing. That's the marketplace. During my work at the city treasurer's office, I was aligned with doing some research on starting what an ESG policy would look like for the city of Chicago. And honestly, the conversation when we started was, was a lot different to where it is now. We were getting the pushback. This is politically motivated. As the fiduciary and responsible, as the investor for the city of Chicago, you should be thinking about your best investment and your investment return. That was the thing that, we all should be focused on, and not, whether this is a good effort or opportunity for a local government to do so. And we were thought leaders at that point in doing so. Treasurer Summers at that point was being a leader in the space from a government perspective, because honestly, that was something that was looked at from the private sector. And when it was looked at, it was always seen as something else was going on. We were doing something to resolve something else. And when we sat down and did the research, the numbers don't lie. There's actually better investment returns when you invest in ESG, when you do sustainable investing. The numbers are there, the investments are there, and the priority and actually the political willingness has to be from the individual driving it. So one of the first things we did at MWRD was think about, what does an sustainability investment portfolio look like? So we inspired my work at the city to create something similar at MWRD. That was, I think, paramount in kind of changing behavior, and that's what a lot of the work that governments are going to be taking now on is changing what the normal way of doing and thinking about what is the proactive forward-thinking approach. And MWRD had been thinking about ESG and sustainable investing before my tenure, in our tenure year there, but putting the question, asking for feedback, asking, where is this a priority for us, and seeing it executable as something that it was passed and it put into a policy is super cool.
Absolutely. You touched on so much there. One thing that stood out to me, when I was 17, I traveled down to Plaquemines Parish, East Biloxi, New Orleans, sure, and a few other Gulf Coast communities that were very severely hit by Hurricanes Katrina and Rita. And so this was, I was a production assistant on a documentary with a mentor, Steve Liss, who's a photojournalist, and he was doing an Oxfam documentary. And the project was looking at these communities 1 year later. Sure. So it's interesting to look back at that experience, a little bit over a decade later now, and see there were a lot of lessons from the hurricanes and the Gulf Coast, sure, in terms of the federal response and how individual actors, nonprofits, faith-based groups, regional actors can all play different roles. And it can be different based upon the circumstance of them stepping up. And I think we're seeing something like that right now, where the federal support can vary as we've seen it from administration to administration or department to department. Sure. And it is so crucial when a municipal organization or a regional organization is able to say, no, we can see a social value case for this. We can see a resiliency case. We can see a financial case. Even to your point, clean energy going from something that seemed like a nice to have or kind of an idealistic thing to, some of our rural towns and our struggling suburbs saying, oh, if we're leasing our land for renewable energy developments, that actually could be a really good source of revenue for a, municipality or area with a reduced tax support, via population. And, it must be very remarkable to, through a couple entities now, see that shift in
honestly, it's all about the political willingness to make the change. Government is oftentimes apprehensive in regards to making change, and the willingness by the leadership at all of the experience that I have was really the motivating factor. Is, when there's a roadblock, you don't let go, you keep going forward. You keep pushing until no doesn't mean no forever. No means maybe for right now, but you don't stop trying, because it's easy to just get a no and then walk away. And that's what normal behavior would be. You get a no, you just walk away and, I tried, oh, well, somebody else will do it. but that somebody else will do it has to be the person who's taking on that approach and saying, look, this is important to me. This is important to our future. This is important to whether it's a bottom line tax incentive or something of the sort, even from a revenue perspective. If that's the core function and you know that there's a good opportunity for investment, a good return on your investment by participating in sustainable investing, then you have to proceed forward. And it's, change is difficult, like I said, but it's definitely worth it.
Absolutely. And diving further in, one of the things we talked about in our pre-conversation, it was so abundantly clear and rightly so that you have a lot of pride in this. Could you talk a bit about some of the sustainability in practice around the green space, the space to grow projects, how this came to be, some of the accomplishments, some of the goals looking forward?
Sure. No, space. It's great that you asked that question, because one of my first, community engagements when I first started was going out to a school that had really begun the process of rebuilding the playground through the Space to Grow campaign. And Space to Grow is a partnership between the Healthy School Campaign, which is the national organization that leads the effort, CPS, Chicago Public School, the Chicago Department of Water Management, and MWRD. And the goal behind it is to go into CPS schools across Chicago in low-income areas where you go and revitalize the school playground. And my first interaction was at the first meeting of this new school on the south side that was going to get rebuilt, and participating in the community engagement component. Going into the library and having parents, teachers, students all participate in saying what their vision was for this new community anchor for that community. And for me, it was eye-opening. It's oftentimes government thinks about community engagement at the back end. Once they have either some sort of proposal, a shiny document, and they go and represent it to the community and say, here, we know what's best for you, and here's a document that proves it. And you can react to it at the back end rather at the front end. And really that to me was eye-opening in the way of how MWRD functions, how MWRD as a government agency is forward-thinking in their approach, and as a coalition, how they can be more participatory, because this was really going to be, these playgrounds really have an impact locally from the local school perspective. Students are able to engage in learning of whether it's a STEM career or community gardens, agriculture, all that. And from a wastewater and stormwater perspective, we create these huge bioretention ponds underneath where we're literally capturing 150,000 gallons of water on site, which for us is a huge win. Any green infrastructure project where we can retain water on site and process it and reclaim it later is a win. But really thinking about how the community can get engaged, asking questions. Is this the right approach that we should be taking? Is it turf that we need here? Is it grass? Do we need more seeding? What kind of native plants do you think make sense for your schoolyard? Was truly eye-opening for me. And that was, it still is one of my favorite projects that MWRD does, is going out and we do 5 of these a year across the city. It's a partnership through 2023, and going out, and I think by then they'll be able to do 30 playgrounds, but engaging communities as the anchor that this community park will serve in the playground, but really making the starting impact around what does the community want, what do the students want, what do the parents want, and going from there, and then bringing that all together and then presenting it at the end. This is what we heard from you on day one. We went back, listened, did what we do as experts, whether it's engineers, landscape architects, so on and so forth, and making a presentation before they put a shovel in the ground and tearing up the current playground, is really embracing the community spirit. And that's where you really make a buy-in. And then I often think that this community engagement really is the buy-in from the community. So when you have an end project that's a schoolyard and a playground, is the community is proud of it. The community feels a sense of commitment and engagement to it, and understanding that this is the community playground and schoolyard that was built for us. So we have a sense of responsibility to take care of it, maintain it, protect it, and learn from it, and make sure, to educate others that if you see somebody littering, that you go out there and tell them, hey, you can't, litter in our schoolyard anymore. This is something that people have made an investment in our community, and we appreciate that investment, and we're going to take care of that investment. And that is ultimately what I think is the real opportunities for making change, is embracing the community and listening to them and hearing them, and having an open dialogue between the two to an end project that they both can be proud of.
It's a really important distinction that you're touching upon. And the hope is becoming more commonplace, but I think you all are leading in this, in that engage in the community early and often, incorporating suggestions is additive and complementary to best practices in engineering,
Sure.
the best practices around resiliency. And it's not inherently a sacrifice. It is additive if you do it right on all these fronts. And also, you touched upon a really important distinction, is the marks for a good project is that the community actually independently feels like it is additive and will embrace it and maintain it, because it is something that actually benefits them after the project, is actually there. And it pays off if you do that early, sincere work.
And my guess, it also saves time, is from an interactional in a project management side, is if you're getting the right response from the start and not having to go 2, 3, 4 times back to your stakeholders, that ultimately saves time, saves money, and you get a quicker win, if you may, for the community in a short duration of time. And I believe the goal is to start the construction of the school yard rebuilt at the end of the school year, so June timeframe, and then it being ready the next school year, so September timeframe. So that summer vacation, if you may, is when they would be rebuilding it, so the students aren't left without a park to have at their school.
And we'll touch on this a little bit more later on in the discussion, but especially now in summer of 2020, open green space is so important, and it's
Absolutely.
so crucial. And
Absolutely. I think COVID is going to change a lot of things. The new norm, if you may, and post-COVID or whatever that may timeframe come.
Right.
But one of them I do agree with you, is that the need for more open green space in general, whether you're living in an urban center or in suburban rural, the need for more urban space for individuals to go out there, and you can't be 6 feet apart from each other if there's not a big enough green space to sit and lay out. And from your public health perspective, your mental health perspective, that I think is ultimately going to drive the way individuals and families understand whether they want to live in urban centers as well as suburban America. And that's going to be a real interesting play in the years to come about what's the driving force, whether if you're a corporation that's willing to headquarter their headquarters here in the city of Chicago, and if they are going to do so, are they going to get 10 or 20 or 50,000 square feet of real estate and leasing terms, or is it going to be a much smaller footprint in the urban center, downtown Chicago, and then have a much larger expansion of a suburban office, if you may, in order for individuals to drive to work, to be able to be more spread out and have access to more resources?
I think there's this opportunity, right now to help drive home how some of these sustainable solutions that maybe historically have been thought of as like, oh, these are nice to haves, or these are luxuries, are actually these really tangible, immediate assets. I just saw that Omni Ecosystems, who is one of our panelists on our place dialogue around the built environment back in 2017, they were just meeting with clients about more green roofs, because private sector companies are like, oh, when we think about reopening, having a nice, welcoming, a safe distance space that's also enjoyable to be in, that's especially relevant now. The first dialogue of season 2 was with Nature's Find, who's doing alternative proteins. And, especially now, as our meat supply chain and our standard protein supply chains are impacted, the need and the recognition for alternative proteins becomes so much more salient. And everything you're doing, because it touches on so many different sectors and it's so lasting, I again really appreciate how intersectional it is and how comprehensive you're approaching it.
MWRD does a call for projects both on stormwater management, but also on green infrastructure twice a year. There are the next proposals for projects are due in August, sometime in mid-August. But it's really investing in green infrastructure projects around Cook County in communities where MWRD it goes into partnership with the local governments, and they're able to do 50% of cost associated with the specific project. And I think that's one of the new norms is going to be how do we do cost sharing projects between local governments and opportunities for more collaboration in regards to green infrastructure. We know climate change is real. It's not going away, and it's in fact the new normal. We're going to have to be thinking about the more intense rainfalls that we are getting in a shorter duration of time. That's going to be the standard from now. May, for example, was the rainiest May on record for Chicago in 150 years. The 2019 was the last record they broke. So it's been 3 consecutive years where we're breaking the previous year's record. That's no longer just a coincidence. It's a trend. It's the normal. And having open green space where we can absorb, retain, and process water and reclaim it later on has to be a part of the discussion. You talked about green roofs. Green roofs is going to be important because it's also where we can capture rainwater, but also can reduce temperatures and provide oxygen and so on, and also reduce the heat inside a building. Yep. So it reduces, from an air conditioning perspective, it reduces your energy costs. So there's multiple facets around being more sustainable in whether it's infrastructure or investing or anything of the sort. There has to be more open and transparent conversation of these are no longer just a coincidence. It's the way that we're going to all have to be living and the decisions that policymakers and stakeholders and elected officials are having to be doing both in public, private, and the nonprofit sector.
Absolutely. And so taking a step back, looking at this elevated need and the light shown on why these types of projects are so important, and the fact that, we are, as a city, just overachievers in terms of breaking rainfall and similar.
Sure.
Can you talk more about, or can you shift into the mega projects, such as the McCook Reservoir Stage 1? What goes into those, why they're so important, how they impact us on a daily basis?
Sure.
Start.
Sure. McCook, what is 1.0, we're on the 2.0. So it went live in 2017, and that's essentially a way for any overflow water in our CSOs. Chicago and Cook County have combined sewer overflow. So we're able to capture water access when we're heavy rainfalls and utilize and put it in place, which is McCook Reservoir now. And there's 3 or 4, 3 more reservoirs. It will be 4th in 2029. And honestly, it's being able, if we weren't capturing the water at our reservoirs, whether it was Thornton, McCook, or others, it'd be in your basement, it'd be in your streets. So being able to capture it, and this has been a project that's been going on for 40 years and some, and MWRD was really an innovator in the space of thinking about what can we do with capturing onsite. The deep tunnel idea is capturing water and reclaiming it later, getting it cleaned and processed later on, whether that's a few days, and it takes a little longer than that to process so many millions of gallons, billions of gallons of water. But at the end, so McCook 1 is 3.5 billion gallons of water that it's able to capture when it's at full capacity. Imagine if that wasn't there. Where would 3 billion gallons of water go? It's quite an amazing sight to see. When McCook 2.0 is accomplished, that'll be 6.5 billion gallons of water. In total, our whole TARP system will be 18 billion gallons of water. Yes, and that's with the B. So if we're not able to capture it and store it and reclaim it later, it's going to end up in your street. It's going to end up coming through your toilets, through your sewers. And it's not fun. I've seen communities and households get really terrible flooding year in and year out because the lack of proper infrastructure, the lack of flooding. MWRD has done their part, if you may, and obviously we're going to continue to do our part in making the investment. But the reality is, Tomas, is the current scale of rain that we're getting, the 100-year storms that our data and how you engineer for are not happening every 100 years. They're happening every 5, every 10 years. So that's the new reality. And honestly, the real conversation we should all be thinking about is how do we get more investment in our infrastructure? How do we get more investment, not only on our roads and ridges and schools and so on, but really water infrastructure and our aging water infrastructure, whether it's the ability to make more investment in stormwater management, rebuilding our lead pipes and our pipelines in Chicago, which is a huge issue, oftentimes not associated with MWRD, but oftentimes the question we get but when we're out in the community is, what can you do about my lead pipe replacement? That is a real issue that is going to have to be addressed in short term. We can't kick the can along the road anymore by bypassing and not thinking about investment in infrastructure. The reality is we're going to have to be making those investments. And Illinois took leadership last year in doing a Rebuild Illinois, and there's about $400 million in investment in water infrastructure projects here. But unknown little fact is that water infrastructure creates 4 times more jobs placements rather than a street getting repaved or a bridge or so on and so forth. So if you think about putting America back to work, which is often the times that we're in that we all should be thinking about with high unemployment and opportunity to get people working again, we should be thinking about investing in infrastructure. Investing, and it shouldn't be a partisan conversation that's happening in Washington. We know it's election season, and those conversations often get lost in what the real issue and the real opportunity is. But my hope is that sometime in the January, if that may be, of 2021, that Congress can really think about infrastructure and really think about water infrastructure. What can we, can we be making more investments in our stormwater management? Can we be making more investments in replacing our sewer lines across the city of Chicago? One simple example is cleaning out and lining the street sewers. Will that be a significant impact in the reduction of flooding on the south and west side?
Yep.
What are those simple things that we can be making investments in to actually make a difference in the community and impact the lives of millions and millions of not only Chicagoans, but people across the country, where we can really make a significant impact in their daily life?
I'm so happy you touched upon lead. I'm someone who lives in Pilsen, so I'm very conscious of these dynamics, and I have my pure filter. But
yeah,
you touched upon the cleaning out the lines, the jetting the lines, and how that can be uneven across socioeconomic geographies. My first job out of college, I worked in sales, marketing, and field operations for a gray water hauling company. Sure. And for folks who maybe aren't familiar with that is cleaning out sewer systems that are non-sanitary, meaning if you're washing your hands for your sink or the water from your dishwasher, etc., similar things to that. And when I would, I'd call up a property manager, I'd get an opportunity to sell them the job, I'd go out and scope the job and lift up the lid myself, because I was that type of account executive.
Yeah, of course, you got to.
And, measure the volume of the liquids and solids, and then, put together a scope, see if we could get the job, and then I would go out with my field crew. And I would take video content and photos of like before the basin was cleaned and afterwards.
Sure.
And I would manage jobs, and it was like this incredibly smelly, rewarding, fantastic job. And I'm really grateful I had it at the beginning. Sure. And it was so remarkable when I would be downtown in the Loop and I'd be scoping a building, and it would be a nice high-income property, and their lines were clean. It was very clear that someone was doing these kind of things, and they were getting it serviced within an appropriate timeline of every 3 to 4 months, like actually cleaning it all out.
Sure. And
when I went into low-income, predominantly Latino, Latinx, African-American communities on the south and west side, it was remarkable because it was either things were skimmed and it was dumped, down the street,
Sure.
or it wasn't taken at all, and like pretty much any negative scenario you could think of. And I remember going to, a public housing complex, Altgeld Gardens, which is the birthplace of modern environmental justice with Hazel Johnson. It's where she's from. It's where she did organizing. It's where Obama did organizing.
Yes.
And scoping those lines, and we didn't end up getting the job, and seeing how much backup and how much it was just a solid. And talking to the community members who were saying, yeah, it's just regularly sludge coming back, through my pipes. It's a very, those kind of experiences stay with you. So when you're talking about these issues are so important.
And when I talk about racial and environmental justice, these are the issues that come to mind. It's not by coincidence there's been a lack of investment on the South and West side. These are actual, real, properly approached, if you may, decisions that have been made by both public and private sectors to not make investments in these communities. And when you make just the simple fact of cleaning out the sewer line, that is perhaps, a city service of some sort that should be, something kind of on like automatic cycle. We should be able to go through neighborhoods and through a wide range of our communities and throughout the 50 wards to have a schedule and say, hey, we're going to do this over the next, 2 years. We're going to clean out the sewer lines and then start again. It should be sort of kind of a role that, city government should be participating, public and private homeowners and developers and so on should be making it a checklist that gets done and not thought about it twice, or not thought about it, is this the right expense that I want to take on, when different parts of the city and different areas are doing it in a way where it's just normal practice of doing business. That shouldn't be the normal case in these neighborhoods that don't get that investment. And when you make these types of investments and you create opportunity for both individuals to feel like I'm worthy of an investment, both by public and private sector engagement, that's a world of difference. I think individuals feel pride when they in their community and their neighborhood and want to see good things happen in their neighborhood and good things happen to their community. And when they go to other parts of our city and across the country, frankly, the question is asked, why are they getting the investments and we're not? What is the real opportunity for that question to be answered short-term and long-term is what we all should be thinking about with the current events that are happening in our city and across the country during a global pandemic. Those questions are stuff that I think about often, and my desire to solve some of them and work on them with you and others is how we're going to make it a more equitable future for my children, your children, and others. And that's what we have to be striving for to achieving as the norm and not as the exception.
And one of the things that I'm very particular about the podcast site, I want to identify those. We all know the sky is falling.
Sure.
Like, what are the practical steps that are needed? What are the practical things that are being done? What maybe isn't being recognized enough? And I really appreciate that you're talking about, you have, I think it was like a 4X workforce development impact when you invest on water projects. You're talking about partnering with, CPS for stormwater retention and also providing better green spaces for children. That ties into the pandemic, that ties into overall mental health. You're talking about being a leader with the climate action plan. There are making sure that we have a reduced burden of flooding, just across the city as a whole. These are all tangible things. And I think it also, and it's hard to measure this, but I think it helps in the industry when you see the large actors saying, no, we're proactively doing this, not because these are bad vegetables to eat that aren't tasty. It's
sure.
No, this is very additive to do these things.
Sure.
And I want to shift, into something that really helps to bring this all together is how have you all considered, approached COVID-19? How is it? And maybe start with how has it impacted things internally? Because as we've discussed before, water is an essential service.
Sure.
And you all are on the front lines and have essential workers. I need water yesterday, I need it today, I need it tomorrow.
Yeah, so I thank you for that, and I honestly think MWRD and wastewater agencies across the Water Environment Federation, which is the national umbrella, has done a recent campaign that wastewater employees are essential workers, and they truly are. Our work didn't stop in March or when COVID, the pandemic started and stay-at-home orders were put in place. Our 20% or 25% of our staff was still going into our wastewater reclamation plants every day. And for honestly, I thank them for that. Because imagine, to my earlier point, imagine not being able to flush your toilet. And in the midst of a global pandemic, civil unrest, the extreme amount of rains that we received over 3 days in the end of May, it was 9 inches of rain over the span of 3 days. And, we were still working. Our workforce is the best of the best. I applaud their work. I applaud their commitment to the cause and to the effort, but our work didn't stop because of COVID, and our work won't stop during COVID or post-COVID or after COVID. We will continue on in doing that. And I really think that the opportunity for us to highlight kind of the continuation of work that is necessary day in and day out. MWRD was there. We actually wrote a letter to the editor, and the Sun-Times covered it, just highlighting, the police and the fire department and the healthcare workers are on the front lines and doing the best that they can during this global pandemic, but so were employees of MWRD. And not only were we able to continue the job without interruption along the way, it was really done exceptionally well with everything else that's going on. So I really appreciate the work that MWRD does day in and day out. Like I've said this to many, that MWRD has the best staff in the world. The leadership for the administration, from the president's office, has been exceptional, to say the least, during this challenge that we're all facing. And nobody had a playbook. That's the best part. I think nobody, you couldn't plan for this in your wildest dreams. I think in one of our conversations, we may have said that, not in my wildest dreams, where I think of 2020, where I'd be wearing a mask in order to go to the grocery store and not being able to see a family member, a friend, or anything like that. It's just surreal. So nobody had a playbook. And frankly, this is halftime. The game's not over.
Right.
That is oftentimes the challenge that inspires me to continue on the work, is that we all have a role to play. And it's not even halftime. I don't even know what quarter it is, but the game isn't over. We're still facing a daily occurrence that COVID is real. COVID is something that we're going to be experiencing for, I don't know how long the duration of time is going to be, but our work doesn't stop, our efforts don't stop, and our need to continue doing the work for it. I will have to say, one of the struggles I have had with COVID is not going out and talking to students and going out to classrooms and educating individuals and community groups and neighborhood associations on what MWRD does, who we are as an agency. We're 130 plus years. We serve over 130 municipalities across Cook County. And that's really the challenge that I've had, honestly, is going out there, not being able to go to community groups and community partners to talk about the work and what more we need to be doing this. One of my favorite things I do with the commissioner is go out and talk to classrooms across both public schools in Chicago and Cook County and across our county, is talk about STEM careers. Talk about, what is the opportunity where we can inspire somebody in the 7th, 8th, 9th grade, or even, a junior, senior, and thinking about the future, and does a water sector career inspire them? And being able to see an African-American woman, what that Commissioner Buclet is, and saying, I can be a commissioner, I can be somebody that works at MWRD in the future. That's a path for me, and educating the community about the opportunity to do so is really eye-opening, because if we engage them on the earliest possible way, whether it's a tour at one of our facilities. Stickney's, in our respect, is the world's largest wastewater reclamation plant in the world. That is huge news when you inspire, and if can we be that trigger or that light bulb that goes off on a student in 7th or 8th grade and say, hey, I can do this. I can be an engineer. I can be an electrician. I can be some sort of skilled labor in the workforce that we're going to need in the months and years to come, as we see an aging workforce in general across a whole wide range of sectors in this country, where we can be able to inspire the next generation of leaders for that. And one of the great programs that Vice President Commissioner Barbara McGowan has done is worked with the US EPA to think about a pilot program in partnership with CPS and MWRD, for example, to inspire the next generation of leaders. And and honestly, to think about the way we can diversify our workforce. That, I think, is key for us, not only in our office, but as the district as a whole, is can we diversify our workforce to be as diverse as Cook County is? We have to strive to make that the goal and make that the opportunity that we all face, that the people that work or represent you in government also look like the people that you represent in government. And that's important work that needs to be had not only by MWRD, by the city of Chicago and Cook County and the state of Illinois. Those should be the markers that we're setting as the goal. And that's the real opportunity to create change, I think, in a whole wide range of ways for us to really resemble and embrace the diversity that Cook County has. And that diversity is actually a good thing, not only for your workforce, but also from an employer's perspective.
You know, there's so much positive in that. And, you know, the fact that this is an effort that you all are doing with CPS and with an EPA grant, you know, again, identifies a couple things. One, even when we see variability in federal approaches, maybe the language changes around, you know, climate change or maybe resilience planning is the current framework. But there's still a lot of people in these departments who are working, you know, career bureaucrats, career government officials who say, all right, you know, overall, this, like, many of these same issues can still be addressed. And I'm not saying that, like, oh, everything is perfect or everything was perfect in one specific administration. But there are people who are at EPA, at DOE, who can say, all right, this is how we frame this within the current administration set of priorities. You know, it looks different under Clinton, Bush, Obama,
Absolutely.
And it can still translate into this impactful thing that you, WRD, leadership is doing with CPS. And, you know, the other thing I heard you speak into, which is so important, is the shared dignity requirement, contribution, and pathway across the different sectors and opportunities. That you're coming in with representation at multiple levels. And, you know, whether it is in the C-suite, whether it's in the skilled labor space, helping to ensure that there's representation just across that and recognition of that dignity and importance. And again, 2020 could not be any more 2020 if suddenly it was just like everyone did not have access to water.
Sure.
And you know, that still is a challenge for some, you know, in Chicago, but it's, you know, I really appreciate everything you're touching upon.
Especially, so to your point on the diversity, whether it's a C-suite, these are the questions that not only need to be answered now, should have been answered, you know, maybe couple generations ago, if you may, on my part. But, you know, now is better than ever. And these are when we start asking the tough question, is whether it's a corporate board and saying, you know, what does your diversity look like on your corporate board? Do you have diverse representation? That shouldn't be a tough question to ask if you're a global company.
Right.
If you're a multinational company, that should be an easy answer, and say, hey, look, our board represents the people, first, our consumers, and the people that work for us. And if you can't answer that simple fact, then there's a starting point for a larger discussion for whatever sector you are in. You have to be able to ask the easy questions: is what is diversity? What does inclusion look like for your company? What does inclusion, diversity look like for your workforce? And if you're a government, can we do more? Can we do more in our minority women business endeavors. The district at the last recent board is taking a policy consideration for in doing a wider scope of LGBTQ inclusion in our business practices. That is a question that needs to be, not only at MWRD, but along the way. But asking the question should be the starting point of the conversation, not the end point of the conversation. And it's not a bad thing for people to ask. It's not a bad thing for being elected officials holding others accountable and holding themselves accountable, frankly. And having that dialogue and conversation in 2020 is by far probably the most important thing that we can get accomplished through everything that we're facing is asking the tough questions and demanding responses, not just asking them and walking away. Is putting our foot to the gas pedal and saying, we're demanding change and we're demanding things be different, and we can't continue to do things the way we've always done them. That's a wise guy saying that's the form of insanity if we expect to do things over and over again and expect them to change.
Right.
We can't accept the normal approach that we've taken for many years and decades. We have to be forward thinking, our approach has to be a way where we're asking the tough questions, we're getting the tough responses back for them, and we're removing the needle, whether it's incrementally or by large amounts. Mm-hmm. If you don't start somewhere, you're not going to be able to succeed at anything. So these are the conversations that inspired me, especially as younger generation of activists and stakeholders are participating in these conversations. They're asking the tough questions and they're demanding responses from them. And that, I think, is ultimately how we create good public policy, both here and across the country. And honestly, we have I'll end on these 2 points: the need for us to participate in our civic duty, whether that's voting or the simple thing of participating in the census. That is really 2 things that we can actively engage and make huge impact. I don't care whether you're a D or an R, go out and vote. That is, it doesn't bother me if you're a Republican or if you're a Democrat, whether what political side you align with. The active fact of you going out and voting is, I think, a civic win for all Americans.
Absolutely.
And participating in your census. There's been a great push around the census across our city and our county, but it really impacts the next 10 years of our life. Whether not only on congressional representation, but also what amount of money the federal government will do in return once the census is counted. And that really is the way we need to think about things, is that it's taking 10 minutes of our time today, but it's going to impact the next 10 years of our lives. And if we don't participate in either, it's hard for me to wake up to a Monday morning quarterback and complain about the next day of an election. Or if you ask them, did you participate in your census? No, what's that? Or I wasn't able to get access to it, so on and so forth. It literally took me maybe 7 minutes, if not that. Mm-hmm. And having those honest conversations with our generation, older generations, that's the way we're going to really make change across short-term and long-term. And I really think I'm inspired by your work. Thank you for being on the podcast and looking forward to just having more difficult conversations. That's what I think, if 2020 has taught us anything, is the need to have more difficult conversations. We may all not agree on the outcome or the solution or the end result, but having those conversations is an exercise in itself.
Absolutely.
And whether it's thinking about sustainable investing, whether it's thinking about sustainable finance or green infrastructure, or the need for more green space, are we making the right investments in our green space across our neighborhoods, and what neighborhood is getting what new park or what opportunity is happening in a different part of our county, and where we're making those investments is really the questions that we all should be thinking about as we not only look at 2020, but the next 5-10 years of activism and government participation.
Well, Dean, cannot thank you enough for speaking so comprehensively, covering the intersectional dynamics here, acknowledging that much like, taking on climate change problems, when we have difficult conversations and move the needle in small and big ways around issues of representation, it's similar to acting on climate change. These conversations are worth it because the outcome is worth it. You will have a better public sector, private sector outcome, the more representation, they've done those studies where they show that the more women on a board or at a company, the better a company performs.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And I really appreciate you being so comprehensive and so generous with your time. And, I also appreciate that you made a point to talk about the fact that so many people in water are essential workers, and these people have been heroic, just showing up day in and day out with all of this uncertainty. And so, please pass along internally that,
Sure,
I
absolutely will.
really, really appreciate, and I think that is shared by the listeners, all the work they're doing.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that, and there's stuff that you can do on your own as an individual. Also, we can be more cognizant of simple things. Is if it's storming outside, don't take a shower, don't run your dishwasher. Stuff like that. Use a rain barrel if you're a homeowner. Disconnect your downspout. Stuff like that we all can do at an individualistic level that could make a world of difference. I often think about just doing things at one increment at a time. If we can make an impact on somebody, whether it's something you say hello to someone or make somebody smile, that's a win. If you're able to do something on your own to save the environment, that's a win. Doing the simple things in life, I think, now has made everybody more simplistic because of COVID, but you can make a world of difference on your own and for the greater good by simple things that we all take for granted or have taken for granted for many years.
Well, thank you again for your time. Please say hello to our first water dialogue speakers from MWRD, Eddie
I sure will.
and Patrick Thomas, and we'll have to check in again soon. But this is wonderful. Thank you.
The next time I'd love to get the commissioners on and participating as well, and hear about from the elected officials' perspective, what this all means to them, because they're really the board of commissioners. I really think is fabulous, and they're the diverse background. They have each in their own specific way a wealth of knowledge, a wealth of opportunity, and I really think you're going to be hearing a lot more from the MWRD board, because they're such more thoughtful leaders in their respective space. And MWRD, in my opinion, like I've told you, is one of those agencies that nobody really thinks about, but we'll be thinking about it much more with everything else that's going on.
Dean, tell us more about what MWRD is doing on the forefront of COVID research and tracking the virus.
Absolutely. So we've been approached by both local partners at several universities to do real-time data analysis and research based on what we do, which is process wastewater and stormwater. But on the wastewater side, it's being able to trace COVID tracings for influx of a spike in COVID cases. That's really real-time data tracking, where MWRD is going to be an innovative thought leader and be able to figure out whether there's a spike in COVID cases in a particular area of the city. And mind you, our jurisdiction is almost 900 square miles. That is a huge piece of land that we're covering. We're obviously going to be taking it in specific areas and not doing a larger trace, but that's the kind of work that MWRD staff and MWRD as a whole is every day pounding pavement, being thought leaders in their respective work, and working in partnerships with national organizations, local universities, the federal government. That's the work that MWRD does every day, and their staff is superb in doing so. And under the leadership of Brian Perkovich, has been exceptional. And the President Steele has been forthcoming and willing to take all that on as an opportunity for us to not only do good, but actually in better society and better civilization.
It's truly intersectional, and it's just one of those things of water touches everything.
You just don't think about it, that one way for us to trace and combat COVID in any shape, way, or form is being able to trace poop. So that's a real-time experience of how innovative COVID has made everyone's world, and in particular in MWRD's world.
And in closing, I want to ask you to say hello to one more person. Please say hello to Cam Davis, as someone from Oak Park, big fan of his. So
Yeah, no, Cam is great, and he's one of the newer members of the board that I was talking about, and they're great. I think the board is going to be exceptional in its way of forward thinking of how MWRD serves not only as a local government, but also being a thought leader in the stormwater and wastewater management sector, but more importantly, where we could be innovative where we can in our approach.
well, on that, thank you, and we'll loop back soon.
Sounds good. Talk to you soon.